Welcome everyone to an exciting skill lab. We're really grateful to have Korin Davis here. She is running the show at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. She's the academic program director and has many hats, but is really the person overseeing the connection between the Washington Center for Equitable Growth and academics. And she is graciously agreed to provide us a general overview today of what the center is about, the different kinds of funding mechanisms, and really, and this is why it's a skill lab, also the kinds of bread and butter issues that you should tend to when you submit a grant to the Washington Center, or frankly, to any other place. There are some sort of more general skills that she can tell you about. And I'm very excited for her to be here. She also lives in Ann Arbor, so if you run into her, then say hi. And we can make this a conversation. We have people in the room, but we also have quite a few online. They'll unmute if they have questions, but you tell them whether you want questions, throughout or at the very end. And
happy to be interrupted.
Okay, perfect. So we'll make it a conversation, and so bring up your questions. And thanks for being here. And hopefully soon again, as we walk down Miller and join us for some other events. Okay.
So I'll stand up, but I may sit down depending on, not really sure yet how I feel. Not used to doing these hybrid presentations. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks, Linda, for your help in coordinating. It's great to be here and talk with you all. So as Fabian said, Korin Davis, Director of Academic Programs, has been with Equitable Growth for about 8 or so years now. So I run all of our academic engagement. And then, as I was telling Fabian earlier, then I hand it off to folks who do more of our policy work. So Washington Center for Equitable Growth is a nonprofit research and grant-making organization dedicated to advancing evidence-backed policies and ideas that promote strong, stable, and broadly shared growth. Pretty relevant to the Center for Inequality Dynamics. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk about equitable growth and how we do our work and what our mission is. But I'm going to try to do that with a beyond equitable growth slant to it, to really encourage you and to think, as researchers how to do policy relevant research and how to translate your research for a policy audience. I'm going to go over current funding opportunities that we have at Equitable Growth and what we're interested in funding. I'm going to talk about evaluation and selection of grants. That is going to be very applicable to seeking funding from private foundations as well as government, as is tips for successful grant seeking. And I am more than happy to take any and all questions you have. Feel free to interrupt me. Fabian, if there's a question in the chat, just jump in. We'll have some time at the end. So Equitable Growth has a unique funding approach. We engage with policymakers to try to understand the questions that they have and the gaps in their understanding when they're trying to formulate policy solutions or just to understand particular problems. And we use that information to guide our grant making. At the same time, we take what we're learning from the academic community and try to influence the policy agenda. So for example, descriptive statistics on the levels of wealth inequality would be something that we would try to use to encourage policymakers to look at particular issues. So to achieve our mission, we again work with academics and we support a community of scholars, both through our grant making, but also through a host of different activities and engagement. And we work to build a bridge between the scholars doing research in the areas that we're interested in and the policymakers working on solutions. So I'll start with our research support and elevation. So our grant program is one important piece of the work that we do, but the work that we do is much broader than simply providing financial support. So while we do provide financial support through our grant and scholars program, we also have a working paper series. Put a quick pin in that. I would love to hear from non-economists in the room or online how we can engage and elevate your work. So I know that working papers are really common in economics, but not so much in other disciplines. So I'd be really interested to hear how we can distill that research and also create some workarounds for the long publication timeline, especially for research findings that are relevant more quickly than they'll actually be published. We have a biannual grantee conference, but we also have a large presence at a lot of interdisciplinary conferences, the annual sociology conference, and a lot of regional economic conferences. And we also provide a lot of mentorship and networking opportunities. So just pictures of our grantees and steering committee members networking and having fun at conferences. In addition to our support for academic work, as I said, we work really hard to take the academic research and use it to inform policymaking. So we distill and translate and disseminate findings for a research audience. I'm sorry, for a policy audience. Policymakers do not read things that are longer than 2 pages. Ideally 1 page. So we do a lot of translating, a lot of condensing and putting into context and sharp and snappy content. We do one-on-one connections with policymakers, both in the executive and legislative branches. We provide opportunities for input on legislation. We support scholars to testify before Congress. This frequently includes making suggestions for scholars that have particular expertise that a congressional committee is looking for, and also providing input and guidance on the types of questions that should be asked at congressional hearings. And we also provide opportunities to comment on regulatory proposals. This is a picture at our grantee conference at the Treasury Department's aptly named Cash Room. It's very fancy. Again, just in terms of translating academic research, distilling the findings and making them broadly accessible, we have a lot of resources for media engagement. So we do regular media trainings. These are frequently done virtually so that we can reach our national network. And we do a lot of help trying to place op-eds, but we also do a lot of backgrounders, just trying to make connections between scholars who have particular expertise and the reporters who have a particular beat that is relevant, and just making sure that reporters are generally aware of the broader literature and the current frameworks for thinking about the issues. All right, so I'm now going to shift to talk more specifically about funding opportunities that we offer. We provide academic grants to current, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
So just taking a step back, so who do you provide that support to and how they get access?
Both in terms of the media, engaged media and policy. So we prioritize our grantees because we're only so many people. So we definitely do that, but we frequently will have questions. We'll receive questions. We get inquiries all the time from the press and the policymakers. I'm looking for an expert on X. And when we respond to those, we definitely go broader than just our academic network because sometimes it requires us to do so. I think that, I would love to work with Fabian to make sure that we're supporting you. So if there are particular content or something that you're really trying to elevate, we can do the best we can to provide support. It's usually just a matter of capacity. We probably could open our media trainings to a broader audience. Okay, so funding opportunities. We fund faculty. It's open to current faculty affiliated with the U.S. University. We fund both individuals and small teams. We focus on discrete research projects, so we don't fund large centers or a rather small grant-making operation. So typically we fund discrete research projects. We don't really fund a project and then consider renewals over several years. Our grants are in the $25,000 to $100,000 range, and we cover the basic costs of conducting research, do not cover indirect overhead. In addition to funding faculty, we have 2 different opportunities to support current graduate students. One is through our doctoral or postdoctoral grant program. So that's open to current PhD students at U.S. universities. If you are a postdoc, you can, or if you're a PhD student, you can apply for either a doctoral or an academic grant. It just depends on the pool that you want to compete in. Doctoral grants are set at $15,000 over 1 year. We do not expect the research to be finished at the end of 1 year. We understand it may take longer. Our dissertation scholars program is a little bit different. It's also open to current graduate students. Students who are in their either the year that they are going on the job market or the year prior to them going on the job market. That's when it's the best fit. It provides $15,000 prorated over 1 year. And it is a year-long opportunity that we really encourage and ask dissertation scholars to engage with us. It is set up to show PhD students how we do the translational work that we do, how to create a research agenda that's informed by policy questions and policy debates, and how to work to translate your research and do outreach to a broader audience. And they are responsible for supporting grant review. So I like to position that as a good opportunity to read lots of proposals and learn about new research and how to do grant review and work through that process. I think most people feel this way, but it is a responsibility. All right, so in terms of the issues that we are interested in funding, we're interested in inequality in all its forms and its relationship to growth. And we support research using lots of different tools. We frequently get the question, do you just support economists? Do you just do quantitative causal research? No, we're very open to a variety of methods across social science disciplines. And qualitative, quantitative, descriptive, causal, quite open. So our annual request for proposals is organized around 4 areas. The first is macroeconomics. The request for proposals is quite long, so I'm just going to give a very broad overview. But if you have any questions about specific research questions or areas of interest, please let me know. So in terms of macroeconomics, we're interested in the distributional effects of monetary and fiscal policy, recession scarring, responses to recessions, the role of government in investment, and economic analysis in government. Economic analysis in government refers to how the federal government does cost-benefit analysis and things of that nature. In terms of market structure, we're interested in the existence and causes of market power, consequences of it, and the effectiveness of policy tools. So that's generally just antitrust policy. In terms of the labor market, we're interested in power in labor markets. So any work on unionizing would fall under here, especially new forms of worker organization, and also absentee power and unequal power on the employer side. We're interested in technology at the workplace. It's been difficult to find technology in the workplace. It's really fundamentally changing both how work is organized, access to work, like algorithmic, using algorithms in hiring. We're interested in how it shifts power in labor markets. So sometimes the introduction of technology isn't just for productive reasons or to decrease labor costs. It can also be a form of power exertion. So we have a very broad view of what technology at the workplace means. And returns to work does not mean returning to the office, which somebody actually thought I was maybe I should go back and change that. It's just another way of saying wages. But also, again, thinking really holistically about returns to work and not simply just a paycheck. Okay, in terms of human capital and well-being, we're really interested in investments in children and families. This is also one of those places that will show how all of these areas overlap with one another. We're particularly interested in long-term returns to investing in children and families. So how does investment at the childhood level, what does that mean for aggregate economic growth? And what does it mean over the life cycle as well? We're interested in human capital deployment. We're not particularly interested in education or health returns, which makes it a little bit tricky. Because when you're talking about human capital development, oftentimes those are the measures that we use. So we really want to encourage researchers to think sort of outside the box at different ways that we can understand human capital development and what different markers might be possible in measuring upward mobility or returns on investments beyond education and health. We're not totally opposed to funding education and health, but we would really like it to be connected to longer term outcomes. We're interested in, as I think I've noted, intra and intergenerational mobility. And this year in particular, just carrying over from last year, we have a strong interest in funding work on childcare. Again, how childcare investments in childcare relate both to long-term outcomes for children, but also for workers. Finally, understanding the drivers of racial stratification and how to reduce racial disparities is an interest that overlays all of our funding interests and all of our work. So preference is given to projects where the research, obviously, I just said this, but I'll reiterate, also touches upon the role that racial stratification may play.
All right, so back to your previous slide about your funding priorities. So I guess a good number of us here work on topics kind of thinking about the causes or consequences of wealth inequality. Would that like broadly be in the human capital and well-being section, or is that like not a huge like shining funding priority for WCEG?
So we use equitable growth, not WCEG. I'll just say that. That's I am bound by lawyers. And our first president said, we're not a radio call station. And also I will say, and I agree with our board on this, equitable growth is a powerful name. That's what we're organized around. So that's why we use that. Wealth inequality is super, it's of great interest to us, which I think why I'm here. Again, it's one of those that probably branches, like goes into all of these different categories. So I think a good way to think about where research fits, I usually think about it by outcomes, right? So if the outcome of interest is aggregate economic growth, probably going to fit in macro. If the outcome of interest is labor force participation or the ability of moms to invest in their children but still participate in the labor market, then it probably fits there. If the outcome of interest is children's outcomes, mobility, then it would probably fit under human capital.
And sorry, additional follow-up when we're like doing these grants, but maybe I'm sure you'll talk about this later, but is there like a section where we should say like, I think this project fits within like X funding priority?
Yes, so I can get into that later, but into more detail later, but yes, like a general tip for grant seeking is read the funding opportunity carefully, whether that's a request for proposals or a description of research interest, whatever it is, read it carefully. You should always motivate your specific research project by articulating clearly how it responds to what the funder is asking.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? I should probably pause. I'll pause. All right, so preferences given in these 4 areas. So for us, policy relevance is really important. We do not expect you to be an expert, so do the best you can. But showing that that you're interested in the current policy landscape and you have some understanding of how your research fits within it is attractive for us. And the last bullet is going to be really important regardless of not just for equitable growth, but most funders. You really need to engage with the literature across relevant disciplines. The economists are the worst at this, so I apologize to any economists in the room. But frequently we'll get applications that saying like, okay, so I'm going to study wealth inequality, but completely just ignore vast amounts of sociology literature on the topic. So just encourage you to be aware and engage with literature across disciplines and not just within your own discipline. I'm going to shift a little bit here to talk specifically about how to apply for our grant program. And so academic grants are coming due. Application deadline is January 23rd. So that's Monday, I think. We have a 2-step process. This is very common for most large private foundations. You start with a letter of inquiry. A letter of inquiry is usually like a 2 to 3 page short description of a research project. And then full proposals are by invitation. So I have a little bit more detail here on what the first stage of our application process is, but let's skip over that for now and get in. We can talk about it a little bit more specifically in the tips for grant seeking. So as I noted, we also have grants for current PhD students. That deadline to apply is March 20th. It is just a 1-step process. So rather than a letter of inquiry followed by a full proposal, it is just a full proposal. We did want to keep the threshold to apply relatively reasonable, however, and so it is just a 6-page proposal, whereas academic full proposals are usually closer to 12 to 15 pages. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the dissertation scholars program, just in case anyone is interested, but also to note that This is another good example of where reading the material on the foundation website and understanding their different programs, what their funding opportunities are and how they're different from one another is really important. We get a lot of applications for the Dissertation Scholars Program where they just are thinking about it as a grant. I think they see like, well, a doctoral grant is $15,000. This Dissertation Scholars Program is $50,000. Obviously, I'm going to go for the $50,000 opportunity, but they don't really take into consideration, they don't do a good job of articulating in their application why they're interested in the program. So just a PSA to be really thoughtful about what it is you're applying for and how it's maybe different from other funding opportunities. So we are committed to building a pipeline of scholars that are doing research on inequality and growth. So we believe that investing in early career scholars and pulling back the curtain on how research matters in policymaking and how you can go about using policy to inform your research questions, distilling your research and reaching a broader audience is really important. So we support 2 dissertation scholars per year, and it's really designed as a program to integrate them into our office. They attend regular meetings, they meet with our policy staff, they go to meetings where we talk about research that has come in through our grant program or through our working paper series, where we say which congressional offices is this most relevant to, and which executive agencies are working on this right now. And we really work to do that heavy lifting of translating and positioning academic research for impact. So a lot of times they just sit in those meetings and they listen, but that's important, right? And we work to make connections for them and start to build that foundation for how to do research that can impact policy. It is right now it's operating mainly virtually. It used to be an in-residence program, and I think it will probably be operating virtually for the foreseeable future. So the application process for this, since it is different, is a little bit more cumbersome. Applications are due on Monday. They include the 6-page proposal and curriculum vitae, as well as 2 letters of recommendation and also a statement of purpose. And again, it would be really important in the statement of purpose to articulate why the Dissertation Scholars Program, as opposed to just the funding, would be valuable to both your academic and professional aspirations. And there are virtual site visits for those who advance to the final round of consideration. Yes.
What do you have in mind as a career trajectory for the grad student who does this?
Great question. It's positioned within our academic programs work. So we are thinking about it in terms of supporting a scholar to go on to have an academic career, but to have an academic career that is interested in really engaging in the policy landscape and with doing some outreach, some translational work. That said, we definitely have dissertation scholars who have chosen other paths. So some of them have gone to work on Capitol Hill and think tanks. So we work really hard to support them in whatever their career trajectory may be. And I do a lot of work in helping them when they go on the job market. And so sometimes that has meant setting up informational interviews with people at other think tanks. I supported one of our dissertation scholars in getting a job at the economic committee in Congress. So we're open, but it is definitely tailored for someone who wants to move into an academic career. Okay, evaluation criteria. So this is Equitable Growth evaluation criteria, but this is really standard. So if you are applying to the National Science Foundation or almost any private foundation that funds academic research, this is going to be pretty standard stuff. So first, you have to appropriately frame your research question within the existing literature. Again, keeping in mind literature beyond your discipline. And again, really being careful to read the funding opportunities and to make the connection directly between the question that you are asking and the question that the funder is asking. I would say though, don't take up too much space convincing the funder that your question is important. If you can connect it to the questions that they're asking, obviously they think it's important. So sometimes we'll have, 2 paragraphs telling us why a particular question is so important and critical. And it's like, well, yeah, we agree. That's why we put it in the call. So you don't have to convince them it's important. We just have to show the connection. You need to show that your proposed research has the potential to advance the literature. So what's unique about this contribution? Where are the holes? What will you be adding? Methodological soundness of the research design, and then including the appropriate use of data. This is the most important one, especially at the proposal stage. You have to have enough work done to be able to show that you have that your research has a likelihood for success, and you need enough detail. So most Equitable Growth, as well as many other funders, have both internal and external review processes. So it's going to go, your proposal is very likely to go out for external review. It's going to be read by experts in the field, and they need to be convinced that your project is going to be successful, because that's exactly what funding is. It's a risk. We are funding a project at an incomplete stage, and it is definitely the case that not all funded research ends successfully. I have had projects completely fall apart because of data access issues. They don't find anything, all kinds of different reasons. And that's definitely a risk, but obviously you have a certain amount of money to give out. You want returns on your investment. So it is going to happen, and funders are going to understand that. But obviously you want to minimize that. Also, it's really important to be clear about what your data access is. So if you're in the process of gaining access to data versus if you have it in hand, you're going to have to be really clear about that. Relevance to the mission, I think I covered that at the top. Use the funder's call to motivate your research. And then for us, again, particularly important to make it relevant to the current policy landscape. I got ahead of myself in my talking points, and I already covered some of this, but I will reiterate. Again, sufficient, providing enough detail, right? Don't spend too much time just on the motivation. You need to really clearly articulate and describe your research design, your data. Sometimes it may be the case, I can answer questions if anybody has it, like, what if I don't have the data yet? How can I show that my research design is preliminary? So if you have access to public data and you're trying to get access to restricted access data, use the public data to say, well, this is what the public data shows, and this is what I expect to be able to add when I get access to this restricted access data. Or you're not exactly sure what your research design is going to be. You can say, I expect to use this method. Here are some others that I would consider and why, right? I'm not a researcher, so I could spout words out, but they wouldn't make much sense. If you say, like, I'm going to use this particular approach, but there may be others that I should consider. Really articulating how you're going to go about the research is important, and you need to be convincing. I'll skip over literature beyond your subfield because we covered that. The budget request. A couple notes here. I've heard other people say this, and I'm going to plagiarize here. Don't just seek research because an advisor tells you to, or you think it would look good on your CV. You should really seek funding for your research. You're clear about why you need it and what you're going to use it for. That's obviously different from like a dissertation scholars opportunity, right? That's more about developing skills and advancing your career. But in terms of just straight up funding, you need to be really clear about what you need the money for and how you'll use it. In terms of faculty funding, it's also important to be clear. I think a good example, like if you have a postdoc, you say, I want $70,000 to fund my postdoc. Well, is the postdoc going to be working 100% on this particular project, or are they just going to be spending 20% of their time on this project? So again, just making sure that the request that you're making aligns with the actual work that's going to be done. Okay, so writing tips and avoiding pitfalls. Plan ahead. Definitely take the time to many places. There's an online application portal. You have to create an account and these sorts of things. Don't leave it to the last minute. Get started early. Look it over. What information is required? Sometimes it'll require a letter from your university. Sometimes it will require you know, the financial office at your university to fill out budget information or provide university's EIN number or something, right? You don't want to be caught an hour before the deadline without this information and scrambling. So get started early, look at the application form, make sure that you understand all the different material that will be necessary while working in university. I don't need to tell you that universities can be bureaucratic. So factor that into your timelines, especially if there is things that you're going to need from an advisor or another office within the university. Organization is really important. Equitable Growth is a small grant program, and we get 300 applications a year. I read them all. So I don't have time to be figuring out how you're organizing your particular proposal. Use headers, use subheaders. That is stuff, it's so helpful, because for me, I need to just, what's the research question they're asking? If I just see the post research, bang, I go right there, right? What are their outcomes of interest? Like organizing it really clearly so that the reviewers that are just churning through a lot of these, it's like anything else. Oftentimes making it past the first stage is really important. Equitable Growth and most private foundations cut 50% of the proposals before just like a lot of people call it desk reject, right? Like a program officer will read through them, half advanced, half don't. So you don't want to create any extra work at that very, very first stage. Should be very clearly organized. We have a template, a suggested template on our website. So just to make it really easy, it has here are suggested headers and subheaders and approximate word counts for each of those sections. Other foundations might not have that, but again, just if they say a letter of inquiry should include, and they give you 3 or 4 bullets, those 3 or 4 bullets are your header. Because you just want that program officer to be able to know exactly where to go, and check the box, and advance it. You don't want to not advance because they're like, I can't make sense of this. Because that's what will happen. Avoid multiple different ways of organizing your research questions. It is unfortunately very common for the opening of a request or the opening of an application to say, I have 2 research questions, to state the research questions. And then further down say, I have 4 research aims. I'm like, well, which is it? Again, if you don't, just really clear organization is super important. I think I covered the rest. Situate the research question, but don't try to convince us of its importance, especially if you're directly answering a question that the funder has, and providing sufficient detail on research design. I covered that too. That's it, but I actually realized I forgot something because I have little sheet cards that I didn't pull out. So I'm going to go backwards if that's okay. I want to pause here for just a second. I've worked in DC for 20 years now, mainly at various think tanks. Research really matters. Policymakers have so many questions, and for the most part, they're really interested. Like they want to come up with good solutions. They want to create good policy. They are getting bombarded every day by lobbyists and special interest groups. Academics are not banging on doors. There are various different ways and tactics that you can both make sure that the questions that policymakers are asking are informing your research agenda, and to make sure that your research gets out of academia and actually makes a difference. And I'd be happy to talk about some of that in the Q&A discussion section, but it's just like call to action, right? Like we face so many problems right now, and we have every now and then an opportunity will come up. It might be an opportunity for like a specific policy area, or I mean, COVID, right? It was a huge crisis. We're just like, what do we do? And there are different moments where the federal government is really just like, we don't know what to do. And there are normal people in these positions that are really looking for ideas and solutions. And just super encourage you guys to work with Fabian and any other resources that the university provides. Reach out to, the local congressman, reach out to advocacy organizations, community groups. They'll be able to put you in touch or to support you, but I just really, really encourage you, don't let your research stay on the sidelines. Don't let it stay, yes, I'm sure it's gonna make great academic impact, and it will and it should, but it's really just want to encourage you to go beyond that.
So let's open it up for conversation. I'll be looking at the Zoom in case someone wants to put something in there or just speak up. You're welcome to do that. And while you're formulating your questions, I want to sort of reiterate what Korin said last, because I've been around for a few years, but what she just said only started resonating with me basically 2 months ago, when it was an event in DC that also featured staff from really high profile, like Senate Finance Committee and, big Congress people. And they said exactly what Korin said. It was like, hey, give us a call. And everyone in the room, all the academics in the room were like, what do you mean? Like, we can call you? You're going to take our call? And they said that, yes, like we are taking lobbyist calls all day long. And we hate it. And we'd rather talk to you first, because we also need you at some point these staffers, most of them are law students or, former law students. And they need to read up on huge literatures as they consider policies. And they'd rather call up Louise and say, hey, what about these, work at home? And what should we be reading? And that really was mind-blowing to me. And so please take Korin's word that this is an actual thing you can do. And as you get established in your field, keep that as an option. I'm just emphasizing it so heavily because I remember a few years back when I had my own visa struggles, I needed to convince this country that I get to stay in the country. When I met with the lawyers,
Were they still taking opinions?
yeah, well, that's right. When I met with the lawyers, the first question they asked me, which I found hilarious, was, so they had to make the case that it's so important that I'm here. And they said, please tell us which policy was changed in response to your research. And I said, it's not exactly how it's going to happen. And it wouldn't have happened that way. But it seemed I laughed. I told the story so many times because it seemed so ludicrous to think that anything I do would actually have an input in policy. And I think what Korin just said and what I heard staffers say is, we want to talk to you. And there's actually an avenue to do that. So that's the other person next to Korin who's sort of running that department. The Equitable Growth has structures in place to facilitate that too. So that's a whole other topic that we could also discuss. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up because I think it's so far into us.
So I have a few questions, and I anticipate applying. I have for many years, I guess.
All right.
I guess the first question, small one, is the distribution scholars program. Do you ever anticipate it being in person, or can it be in person? now?
It used to be in person, yeah. It's hard to answer right now just because Equitable Growth, like every company and organization out there, is trying to figure out like how much are we a remote office, in-person office, a hybrid office. So at the very beginning, it was designed as an in-residence program with flexibility to go back to your home institution. Obviously, it's important to meet with your advisor and everything else. So it was always designed pretty flexibly, but the idea was to integrate into our office. Fabian said, I live in Ann Arbor now, and we've hired people from all over the country, and I'm not the only one within the organization who moved. So we still have an office, but we don't have like as many people there all the time as we used to. So making the in-person bit a requirement seems unreasonable.
Right.
So we can certainly support somebody to be in DC if there were a reason for them to be there. We can provide office space. But for the near term, the way that and especially because I'll be supervising this person and I live here. I'm in DC quite regularly, but so I think it's going to be hybrid,
Right.
Forever.
Right.
And the balance of it being like in person versus virtual, I think will shift depending on the person and the role.
Right. I guess I particularly asked in order to have that kind of face-to-face time that Fabian mentioned with congressional staff or something like that. And then I guess leading to the second question, with the project proposals that you received, I can imagine that most applicants probably have set of projects that they could
Yeah.
apply in the ground. And that's the same with me. I work on the big wealth inequality study, Bobby heads. And as kind of subset of that, I have a set of projects that are much more about policy simulation, particularly wealth taxation and redistribution. So there's like two sets of polls or two sets of research projects there. I wonder how you think about dealing with that, particularly at Equitable Growth.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one that's pretty unique to graduate students. So at the faculty level, you would just apply for one project, right? If you had multiple projects that you were interested in applying for, you'd submit separate applications, and we're very open to that. For graduate students, it's a bit different because the $15,000, and this is true, I think, like Russell Sage has a $15,000 program. Can't remember exactly what their level of funding is. Upjohn Institute has grant for graduate students, like there's other places. And I know because I've talked with program officers, collaborate a lot. The funding world is small. We think about it a lot more as like supporting an individual as opposed to supporting a specific research project. So because you still need to be really convincing that your research is sound and is going to be impactful, and you only have a short number of pages, 6 to 10, you do need to spend adequate time describing the particular project. So I think it's typically best to describe your body of work and the ongoing projects, your active and ongoing projects, but then just focus on forms. So you can say, this is my research agenda, these are the different projects that I'm going on right now, this is how they relate to one another. I'm going to focus on this one particular project. And I think you can think about that both in terms of like how to identify that project. You can think of if you have a discrete funding need, or if it's going to be taking up most of your time in the time period of the grant, or relevance to who you're, relevance to the where you're seeking funding from.
Right.
Do you know what the like rough timeline is to get the invitation to submit a full proposal for the academic grants? So, kind of like how much time do you have to like write the whole thing?
So from invitation to due date, typically it's about a month. For us, it's a month. We'd never go shorter than a month, and for most other private foundations, typically about a month. I'm not sure about government, but I would imagine it's something to take that time.
I'll add to from our side, sorry. So as Korin mentioned, then there's on the university side, administrators that need to be taken care of. Of course, Melissa shepherds these things very effectively, but just so you can locate that, what needs to happen on this side, the letters of intent, often you can submit without any formal routing, and correct me if I'm wrong on anything. Once you got the invitation to submit a full grant, at that point, you got to really, go through the internal channels. So it may sometimes be worthwhile at least thinking about getting things lined up for that. But once you have the invitation from the letter of intent, really got to get the wheels going here so that there is a, the budget gets reviewed before you can submit.
Yeah, as soon as you get the invitation to submit a full proposal, reach out to an administrator and figure out how to go about doing that. It's doable, but it's really a big headache. I've awarded grants before where the the principal investigator has not done that. And it's a huge pain in the butt, and it really delays dispersal of the grant. It usually starts with me I have to send the open call. And they have to like start from the very beginning. They have to set up the pre-award, and then they have to set up the post-award, and it's a big headache, and you don't get off on the right foot from your funder friends. Go ahead, and then we had a question on the back next.
So just to clarify, the academic grants are for faculty.
So current PhD students and postdoctoral scholars are eligible to apply for an academic grant, but you would be competing in that pool. So the competition is usually less in the doctoral pool than it is in the academic. But yes, you're open to apply for either.
So there's something you said that I wish you had said to me 20-some years ago. and bears amplification, I think, which is that a proposal should bring some evidence that it's feasible, and oftentimes that means doing some of the work.
Yes.
So there's like especially for young people, but I must say I'm still confused about this, which is there's like a continuum from what a layperson would call a proposal, meaning you haven't done it yet,
Uh-huh.
and what a layperson would recognize as a prize for completed research. And we're basically in these, most of these proposals, there's like an interior point there. And you don't need to tell us your secret sauce, but it would be nice to just elaborate a little bit on that trade-off.
That, we call that the sweet spot. Like you have to get like, I have heard, and I get this feedback sometimes from grantees, like, oh, like, I thought that you finished a project and then you get funding for it, right? That it has to be done and that's a best tactic. That might work sometimes, but you have to show why you need the money, right? Most funders want their funding to make a difference. They want it to go to ensure that research that wouldn't otherwise be done gets done.
Yeah.
So you still need to have work left to do, and you need to be able to clearly articulate in your proposal what that work is. At the same time, you do need to have a certain amount of work done, but I guess I would think about it as like, as you're approaching a new research project and you're thinking about, I have this question, like, how do I even begin to answer it? Like, you don't have to have all the answers, but what data sets are gonna give you the data that you need, right? If you're gonna do qualitative research, like, what's your sample? How are you gonna reach them? Like, that's the sort of work that has to get done. And in order to be able to put together a convincing proposal. It definitely is problematic because sometimes you don't have, sometimes people want to, for example, like buy out of teaching in order to do that kind of work. And I just want to recognize that from a foundation standpoint, it's not perfect. And it definitely means that the faculty at well-resourced institutions have a leg up. And so we're trying to do things to address that. Russell Sage, I don't know if it's going to continue. They have a really cool developmental grants program, which I think is great. And it's like funding for that early stage. And I know that the intent is to really try to support under-resourced scholars and scholars who have a harder time putting successful applications into these really competitive grant programs. I would love to do something like that too. So, any super rich funders that want to give me some money to do that, that'd be great. So it's definitely problematic. It's problematic, and I don't want to pretend that it's not, but you have to put in enough work. You have to develop your research to the point that you can be really convincing that it has a high likelihood of success. But again, you can't finish it. Does that answer your question? It's a tough one. It's one that funders struggle with.
I can say sort of from the Reaver perspective, I often in these kinds of private foundation grants, personally, I do that, and I've seen it done by other reviewers too, is sometimes it's just, you have a concern about, you have this great idea and you've identified the PSID and unfortunately I know enough about the PSID that I then expect, well, actually this sounds great, but I think you'll only have 200 people in your sample.
Yeah.
And you haven't figured that out. So you may actually, so if you had, either you would have not submitted that grant or you would have presented, hey, this is good enough. And I know I can do it. And those, I assume for a program officer to kill the project. If someone who's knowledgeable about data says, I'm not so sure whether they can do that, that's about it. And you prevent that by showing that it's feasible. And that means you actually have, established access to in some things. You have established access to data and know sort of that you have enough.
And it depends. Some grant programs will provide you the opportunity to respond to reviewer comments. We don't have a formal revise and resubmit process, but a lot of places will, where if somebody like Fabian were to say, like, you're only gonna have 200 people in your sample, then maybe they can say, oh, well, we're gonna focus on solution. So sometimes you have opportunities to revise and resubmit, other times.
As for the policy angle, so, Fabian said, oh yeah, they just want us to call them. Right, I imagine they're pretty busy, like dealing with whatever's in Joe Biden's closet at any, like, there's all kinds of things that are happening at any one moment. And so like, just because I did a piece of research and it came out today, how does that, how can I connect that temporally to whatever is important policy wise?
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I do. So I think one place to start is to make sure that the research that you're doing is policy relevant in the first place. So again, like I would look to, I think a couple good resources are identify the congressional committee that works on your area and just keep an eye out on what their schedule is. Because the hearings that they're calling tell you exactly what they're up to, right? So, okay, like I'm gonna look at whatever it is, whatever the committee or subcommittee is, just keep an eye out on a couple of those things and figure out, okay, what's the hearing schedule? What topics are they covering? Executive agencies put out regulatory agendas. They typically cover like 2 years. That tells you exactly what they're doing, right? So the Department of Labor is like, they're gonna look at access issues across states for unemployment insurance, or right now they're reviewing overtime pay, right? So what different regulatory issues are coming up? So that's a good way to think about it's if you're looking for research ideas, like there's one place to start, right? So you can do that. And then you can just start, it's not always the sort of thing where you can just say like, hey, I have this research and you need to know about it. It's like anything else, it's building relationships. So I'd encourage you, whether it's at the state level, identifying community organizations in Southeast, like in Southeast Michigan, advocacy organizations that may be national or local. You just start to do like a little bit of ground laying for like who are some of the nonprofit government people who are working in my space, and just try to maybe send an email. If you want to get a coffee, want to learn about your organization, or just doing you see that a hearing is coming up and you just maybe send an email to a staffer. You never know. They might never respond, but you never know. I mean, we get a lot of calls from staffers saying, they're busy. We have a hearing next week. I need an expert witness. Send me a list of scholars who are working on this topic. And we scramble and put together a list of scholars and we send it off. And sometimes they invite them and sometimes they don't. Or we're putting together a hearing and we need, oftentimes it's like a junior staffer. They're asking me for questions. Like, oh, okay, you're talking about wealth inequality. I'll email Fabian. What questions should they ask? So it's like establishing lines of communication. The staff is sort of the first step. So I think just doing like identifying a handful of organizations or contacts would be the way to go. And then they'll be more likely to respond to you if you send them your research.
I'll again add from the Michigan perspective. So the Equitable Center has this mediator role, but the University of Michigan has a DC office too. You can basically call them and say, hey, I've been working on this. Do you have, can you give me some guidance on who may be interested in this? That's their whole job, making these connections.
And when it's state focused as well.
And state focused, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't add this, but I should have. Figuring out what your internal resources are. I think is whether that's faculty, communications department, or government affairs department within the university. I'm sure University of Michigan has a lot of resources.
Well, good. Well, in perfect time and very, very useful. Really, thank you again. And we hope to see you around for other events too. So thank you.
Great.